college campus protests happening in Portland and across the country.
You just heard President Joe Biden weighing in moments ago, saying none of this is a peaceful protest, that students have the right to protest, but not the right to cause chaos. So let's get into that issue with Thomas Berry. He's a research fellow at the KOIN Institute. Thomas, good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining
Appreciate
us.
the time.
You know, we've been following the situation for several days now. As you look at the constitutional issues surrounding these demonstrations and where it crosses that line, I think that's something that police departments have been weighing carefully as they look at when to move in on some of these demonstrations. What considerations are at play here when you're balancing the right of free speech with some of these more actionable demonstrations?
Sure. So public universities, state-run universities, are required to follow the rules of the First Amendment, and the Supreme Court has set out three key factors when evaluating whether a rule complies with the First Amendment. Rules have to be viewpoint neutral, they have to further a significant government interest, and they also have to be reasonable in context. So viewpoint neutral means you can't have different rules depending on what are the protesters saying. You can't say pro-Palestinian protesters have to abide by stricter rules than pro-Israeli protesters, or vice versa. You have to have a significant government interest, so things like the educational purposes of the university. You have to abide by, you have to have rules that are actually furthering those goals of allowing people to take exams, take classes without significant disruption to that. So those are what courts look at more than anything else. And also you have to leave ample alternative channels for protest, for First Amendment activity. So if you had a rule that no protest was allowed anywhere on a campus, that would be a problem. A campus has to essentially show that we do have areas, we do have rules that allow protests, demonstrations to occur in some respect.
So in the case of Portland State University, you know, the PSU president, Ann Cudd, has said multiple times that she's willing to have an open dialogue and has encouraged peaceful protests. But again, where is that line where a protester is no longer protected by the First Amendment when, you know, they have barricaded inside the Portland State University library? And last night we've seen demonstrators, you know, throw chairs at windows and walls. Where is that line and when is it crossed?
I'd say the simplest answer is it crosses the line when it is conduct that you could criminalize for reasons entirely separate from speech. And the Supreme Court has made that clear several times as well, including very on point, a case where they said you don't have a First Amendment right to camp out overnight on the National Mall in Washington, D.C., even if it's for the purpose of making a legitimate political point, in that case, protesting homelessness. That was a case called Clark versus Community for Creative Nonviolence from the 1980s. So if you can criminalize vandalism, burglary for reasons entirely separate from speech, then you can still criminalize that, even if the purpose of doing that is to send a message. Just like we've seen, for example, climate protesters throw paint on art and national monuments. If you can criminalize throwing paint on a monument for no expressive reason, you can equally criminalize it, even if it's for an expressive reason.
So, Thomas, the challenge then for police in this situation is to document the criminality so that this can be prosecuted. What do they have to be, taking into consideration in this situation so that these arrests actually result in prosecution down the road?
Absolutely. You have to be very careful, especially in the chaos here where there might be a mix of people, you know, arrested in different places. Had they actually trespassed into a building they weren't allowed to be in, had they actually gone past a curfew that, again, was set following reasonable rules. So where a person was arrested, what particular conduct were they doing, that's going to be key. It's certainly true that you have a right to protest in general out in the open, in public places on universities, in areas that the university has designated as valid areas for protest. So police do have to be careful that they're not just blanketly arresting people across the whole campus without discriminating between what exactly were they doing.
Interesting. Well, it's going to be a conversation we continue to have here because we're really in the beginning stages of seeing people be arrested at the campus of Portland State University. Thomas Berry, research fellow at KOIN Institute, really appreciate your time this morning and shedding light on what can be some murky water from time to time. Really appreciate it.
Happy to. Thanks for having me.
It's 8